All right. So this is hard to accept Destiny facts. So this person posted this about a week and a half ago, and I just want to react to some hard to accept Destiny facts and see where people are at in terms of this. So they start 90% of the time you won't be able to tell the difference between a 5 out of 5 roll and a 2 out of 5 roll with the major perks being good. I have to absolutely agree with this. If your 2 main perks are good, or at least decent, at least in PvE anyway, you will not be able to tell literally at all any sort of a difference whatsoever. In fact, I think the only people who can really tell the difference between those roles are like super high-end PvP players or super engaged PvPers. Those are the only people who are going to really be able to tell the differences, those subtle differences between guns, which is why I usually tend to just give people the main 2 perks. And as also, I'm a PvE guy, right? I'm PvE guy. As long as your 2 main perks are good, the overwhelming majority of the player base will not be able to tell the difference at all. Let's see what the top hard to accept Destiny fact is. It's not bugged. Your RNG is just trash. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people think that because they haven't gotten something, that something is bugged or broken or whatever. It is possible to just have really bad RNG. Now, don't get me wrong. That is also a really bad feeling. It's a bad feeling to not, like, get the thing that you want after so many tries. Like, I don't know how many runs before I got Heart Shadow. Heart Shadow is probably something that took me the longest amount of time to get in terms of, like, a raid/dungeon exotic. But sometimes your RNG is just bad, and there's nothing you can do about it. And there's a difference between it being bugged and it being annoying. And the overwhelming majority of the time, it's not bugged. You just have bad RNG. 22 runs without Heart Shadow. 250 plus runs with no Vex. Have there even been 250 loot opportunities? Because not all of those are looted. When did VOG come out? It came out let's say it came out last year. 52 weeks, 3 clears a week. When it's the featured raid, it's supposedly farmable. Do we have exact, like, data? Now, granted, I don't think that this should happen. You should not go 250 runs with no Vex. People should not be going 100. People should not be going 50. IMO, the most people should have to go is like 25 in order to get a raid exotic. It's farmable, but the exotic odds stay what they are normally at during those weeks. Yeah, I was not around for the whole VOG farming situation. I was just not home, so I wasn't really sure what was going on. This is doing every character every single week for an entire year straight and then also farming, and that just seems insane to me. I got on my 30th run of the same week. All right, let's move to the next one. Your vault is 90% full of shit you will never use. I think we all know how I feel about this one, in that it is 100% true. Most people could delete their entire vaults today and not notice a difference in their gameplay whatsoever. You could wipe your entire vault. The average player could wipe their entire vault, not notice a difference. I'd give you 50 items. You can hang on to 50 items, trash the rest, you'll never notice a difference. Worked out I probably used 32 guns out of the 400 I currently have. The rest I could shard and I never miss them or care, even if they're perfectly rolled. Not gonna, but now I know. Yeah. People are too caught up on the what if this becomes good situation. What if it's a gun you can't get anymore? Guess what? Bungie will release another one. They'll release another gun that will be on the same level, if not slightly better, than guns that we can't get anymore. They'll always make new stuff, because one of the main things that they heard as player feedback was that there's not enough new things to go get. And now they are making new things. Now is okay. All right, hilarious meme. Crucible will never actually be balanced. This should not be a very difficult thing to accept. This should be a very easy fact to accept. I don't know why this is technically the third highest rated thing. This should have been accepted years ago. Literal years ago. This should have been accepted. It's the amount of things that Bungie has to account for in Trials and Crucible is insanity. It's absolute insanity. There's not a chance in hell it will ever be balanced. And all things considered, like all the stuff that they need to micromanage, they at least try. You know how many things have been nerfed in PvE because of PvP? Now, I will give you matchmaking is a bit of an issue, and we'll see how the skill-based matchmaking changes end up changing things. But yeah, this should not be a very difficult thing to comprehend. Just because you were killed by the architects does not mean it's not your fault. What a great take. Number one answer on the board for getting killed by architects are phalanx. Let's say phalanx, right? It's got to be phalanx, and their death is killed by the architects. How many years have we known that phalanx shield slaps can sometimes kill you instantly, no matter what? How long have we known? How long has that been a thing? Years. Years and years and years. So most people should know by now that if you are walking up to a phalanx and they slap you with their shield, there's a decent chance you're gonna die. And if you're still blaming the game at this point because you did not get away from a phalanx, knowing that it has a chance of one-shotting you, that is a you problem. You should know that by now. Now, granted, should that happen? No, but it's a behavior that has been happening for so many years now that you should know in the back of your mind, there's a chance you can die. And therefore, you should try to avoid putting yourself in the situation in the first place. That's why I don't get near phalanx. Other situations, you know, sometimes, I'm not saying every time you're getting killed by the architects, it's your fault. Sometimes it's just, you're flying backwards into a wall. The game thinks you're flying a little too fast and it kills you, but it seemed pretty slow. Sometimes it's just, that's what happens. But phalanx is the number one thing that I see people complain about. They're like, oh, it's not supposed to one-shot me. Everyone's been one-shotted by a phalanx. It's just what happens sometimes with the geometry, how the shield hits you, how you collide into the ground. I'm not going to pretend I know how it works. Sometimes you touch the wall and fall in saber. Yeah, that is another one. Absolutely another one. Now, granted, that's not as egregious. Like, I'm not going to crap on people as hard for something like the fallen saber ramp down to the boss, because like it's just kind of like an annoying thing, but you should still approach it knowing that there's a decent chance you might die. Angle your jump differently. Should it be like that? No. Obviously, it should not be like that. And obviously, if they could fix it and make it not do that anymore, that's the ideal. But you know that there's a chance that it can kill you. So try to avoid it. This is probably the best one so far. I think this is the best one so far. Let's see the next one. A peer-to-peer based FPS game will never be competitive. I mean, I think by now, this kind of goes into the Crucible balance thing. And this person's only even going off just like connections, right? Peer-to-peer. They're just going off how connections work in the game. There are so many other things that make it so this game will not be a competitive game. Now, people can make it competitive. I think there was a tournament recently, and people come up with their own custom rules and this and that. And it can be made competitive by other means, but Bungie is never going to embrace that side of the game because there's just so many things going on. There's too many factors to account for, and they're never going to go for it. And also, like, I'm sure they have plenty of data to back up the fact that a lot of people are PvE players. See literally every exotic that has had a PvP requirement. One of the most played games on Steam doesn't have dedicated servers is beyond me. We don't know how the engineering and the networking behind the game works, because it's not just PvP. I imagine going from like one network setup to a completely different one for different sides of the game within the same game is not the easiest thing. Again, I'm not a network engineer. I have no idea. They need to account for not just PvP. Like, I can't imagine they just like, oh, this part of the game is only dedicated servers, and then this part of the game we need this other sort of networking so that people can, you know, constantly be rotating in and joining each other. I have no idea how it works. Not a clue how it works. But I also imagine it's, number one, it's a lot more complicated than people are going to give it credit for. And number two, if they did it a certain way, it's probably because that's the best way for them to do it for their game. If there was a different, better way to do it, they probably would have done it. But right now, the way that it is right now is the best way for them to get things working in their game for as many people as humanly possible. Let's see the next one. Every class has its own problems and believes that the other classes are overpowered because they got killed by one in the crucible. I mean, I definitely believe, like, obviously every class has its own problems. I think the bigger thing is that people think that Bungie balances classes because certain devs play certain classes and they want them to be better or worse, which is just the most insane thing that you could possibly say. I mean, granted, I'm sure some people think this. They believe that certain classes are overpowered because they got killed by one in the crucible. But yes, every class has its own strengths and weaknesses. That's what makes them different. But anyone who believes that Bungie balances characters based on which ones they like to play the most, all the classes have some dumb shit. Destiny is a PvE game first with a PvP mode second. This should not be very difficult to accept. I think PvPers might have some copium with this. Anyone who does not realize this at this point is, I don't know what to tell you. Very obvious that this is a PvE experience first over PvP. Are there any takes that are not PvP bad? I don't know. We're digging through them. It's okay to take a break. Don't let the game control your life. This shouldn't be hard to accept, but I feel like for a lot of people it is. And this is something we've been talking about quite a lot, is people who are just addicted to the game, constantly not knowing that they should take a break. Like, take a break. Exactly, Gilda. If you're not having fun with the game, take a break. There is nothing wrong with just taking a break from the game and come back once a year. Last year, I think, most of my friends, they played the expansion. They played that first season of the expansion, and then they came back for the last. They enjoyed all of the seasonal content and the seasonal story stuff, all that kind of stuff. Great way to play the game, right? Or if you want to play out throughout the year, log on, do the story stuff, log off. Log off when you're not having fun anymore. It took me a very long time to, like, be comfortable with that. And I mean, I still play, you know, even when I don't want to be playing. There's nothing wrong with not getting everything in the game. There's nothing wrong with that. If you want to commit to getting everything in the game, then okay, commit. But if it's not fun anymore, stop. There's nothing wrong with that. You don't need every title. You don't need all the guns. You don't need all the crafting patterns. Take a break. Again, it's like 10,000 hours Destiny guys saying, you know, they're losing interest in the game after 10,000 hours. Good. F off for a little bit. Come back later. Even I have been able to wean myself off of World of Warcraft, right? It took a while, but even I was able to break the spell on one of the most addicting games I've ever played. And I wasn't even doing that for YouTube. I was just doing that because I like WoW. You know what I mean? Thought you quit WoW cold turkey. I did because I had to. But that entire time, like, there were so many times where I desperately, like, wanted to get back into WoW. And it was literally only, like, self-control that made me not play. But, like, for years, I still wanted to play all the time. And now that, like, that spell has kind of been broken in that I don't want to play anymore, that's kind of what I wasn't constantly thinking about playing WoW and just, like, thinking of ways where I could sneak it in or try to cram it into my schedule. And eventually, like, slowly over time, that spell was broken. Bungie has too many levels of player commitment that they will never please everyone. Top 5% of players playing hours every day need to understand that Bungie cannot cater to them and their desire for constant content. Yep. I learned that lesson 6 years ago. Bungie is not going to make content for the hardcorest of hardcore players. They're just not. Because the hardcorest of hardcore players makes up a very tiny percentage of their player base. And even if those are your ride or dies, and you would think you want to supply them with as much content as possible, if you only supply the ride or dies, then everyone else is not going to engage with the game anymore, and then you don't make money, and then you can't make any more game. I learned that lesson a long time ago. No, and this was an issue a while ago as well, where I feel like I need to say Bungie's job is not to make content for content creators. I feel like there was a time just during like, you know, YouTubing and gaming in general, where there was like this sentiment that devs should be making stuff for content creators to make content on. And I'm just like, dude, it's your job to come up with content based on what they give you. Make the most of it, or don't, and do something else. People still think Bungie caters to streamers. That should be on there. I wonder if that's on there. Sometimes it's Bungie's fault, and sometimes it's the community's. Here's something I'll say that I've definitely said in the past. Most of the things that Bungie have chosen to include in the game are the direct result of player feedback. Some things are your fault. For example, artifact leveling. That's direct feedback from the community. Everyone hates artifact leveling now, but guess what? There was a time where everyone was complaining that they wanted to level no matter what content they were doing. No matter what, they still wanted to progress. They still wanted to feel like they were leveling. So Bungie said, okay, here's the seasonal artifact. Now, no matter what you do, as long as you make or generate some level of experience, that's going to go towards a level. And now you level doing whatever you want. That was a direct result of player feedback. Seasonal artifact mods. Another thing from player feedback. The community wanted the meta in PvE to change more frequently. They wanted things to shift every now and then. So Bungie said, here are some mods that change things up. And now people hate that. Now people are being forced into use specific champion weapons in order to do GMs. But people's opinions change. Yes, I understand that. But it takes a very long time for Bungie to implement feedback that they get from the community. After, well, not all of a sudden, but after a while, things change. And now Bungie needs to think of ways to change things. And that takes time, right? Now we're tired of things. And now Bungie needs to think of new things and new ways to get people excited about stuff. And I'm sure they're working on that. These things take time to change back and forth, right? Bungie has to develop things for months and months and months. And then they could find out that like 6 months later, the community is like, yeah, we don't want this anymore. Turns out we don't want this. And Bungie's like, well, we just worked like 9 months to figure out this system. And now they don't like it. So now we need to spend who knows how long trying to figure out a new system that people are going to like, on top of all the stuff that we're also trying to do. Like they launched like the seasonal artifacts, like that was one of the big features, and now people are tired of it, and it's like, well, we need to figure out a new system, and that takes a lot of time. But a lot of things that Bungie has done have been the direct result of player feedback. There are a lot of people who are tired of the seasonal artifact. Maybe they're not tired of like the end game mods, but they're definitely tired of having to change the weapons that they use season over season because they just want to use the same stuff over and over. And I'm not saying this is perfect, but I am saying that the community drives a lot more design decisions than they think. Let's move on. We're getting lower in the points here, so some of these might be iffy. Let's see. Sometimes Gambit is fun. Moving on. 99% of PvE nerfs are because of PvP players. 99%. That seems high. That seems high. I'll definitely give you quite a few have been because of PvP. I don't know if I'm going 99. I don't think I'm going 99. I'm going high, but I'm not going 99. Yeah, no, I'm going to sort by controversial a little bit later. Sometimes in PvE is just too good, and they need to bring it down. That's just the facts. Having opinions of the game be fueled by nostalgia is not a good thing, but I'm sure saying this But I'm sure saying this is like painting a bigger target on my back. I've spoken enough about D1 nostalgia lords and how people, oh, Destiny 1's so much better, blah, blah, blah. Like, I lived through Destiny 1, guys. I lived through it. There's a lot of stuff that people complained about. It was not... Destiny 1 was not just the first 2 months of the Taken King. People remember only the good stuff. They don't remember the bad times. And that definitely skews some things. Now, is everything in D1 worse than D2? No. But a lot of things, I feel like, are driven purely by nostalgia. Now, one thing I do miss, strike scoring. Bring it back. Implement on it. No, Sparrow Horns can stay. Skeleton keys, I know people did enjoy about D1, yeah. If I had more time to like think about stuff, I could probably come up with some retorts, but yeah, strike specific loot with the keys. Although I think there was I'd have to go back and watch like old videos about skeleton keys, but I feel like they didn't launch out of the gate quite well, but I'd have to go back and watch it. D1 had more consistently replayable content. Can you elaborate on that? We're gonna pretend Court of Oryx was replayable. We're gonna pretend that shit in the Plague Lands was as replayable or more replayable than stuff we get in Destiny 2. Yeah, Archon's Forge. I'll give you as replayable because they're basically in the same vein, but more replayable. You tell me Prison of Elders was more replayable. I feel like strikes were more replayable in D1. Part of it, I think, is like we weren't as strong as we were in D1, and the game was also a lot slower paced, and I feel like that definitely had some sort of influence. I mean, there's some D1 strikes that are just bangers, but also D1 was only out for 3 years. We're riding on 5 years for D2. And I'm sure if we got to play those same strikes as often as we played some of the D2 strikes, we'd get pretty tired of them as well. Prison of Elders is better than most seasonal activities D2 has had recently. Right, but Prison of Elders was marketed as an end game piece of content. And it was supposed to be like a pseudo replacement for raids. People did not take that very well. As soon as we found out that we were not getting a new raid every single expansion launch, people were not stoked. And it's basically on the level of a seasonal activity at this point. So, all right, let's move on. There is no end game. Back in D1, Vanilla, D2, and Forsaken, sure, but the moment they vaulted old content, the end game just became the game. A new player starts the game, does some strikes, gears from 1350 to 1540, and starts grinding the same things they usually do, but this time they only get 1 drop per week. They do this so they can reach some arbitrary number and do their GM raid dungeon. That's all there is to the game. People are burning out because there's weeks and weeks worth of grinding for what ultimately doesn't feel like any difference at all. I mean, we've definitely had we've had our fair share of end game discussion. I can remember one of the earliest videos I ever made about leveling was in Rise of Iron. Why max light has lost all meaning. Let me just look at the description here. Nowadays, it's more like forever bored at 400 as opposed to forever 29. What's the point of getting to 400 light if nothing in the game actually requires 400 light? We get to it so quickly now, and it feels like the only point is to say that you have it. When everything is the end game, nothing is the end game. In Vanilla, light 30 was almost required for VOG due to power scaling. It was annoying to get. In Dark Below, light 32 had the same effect. In House of Wolves, light 34 had a lot of meaning, but was required by a lot of people in the first week of the game. See my video on Ascension, aka Infusion. In Taken King, light 320 was valuable for Oryx and took a while to get due to Infusion rules. I think max light was the most rewarding to get at this time. In Rise of Iron, light 400 is so easy to get and barely takes any time. On top of that, there are no light 400 activities. It's not like there were many max light activities in the past, but it wasn't as much of an issue because it was harder to get. I think Forsaken had one of the more interesting, like, maybe not interesting, but more traditional MMO type leveling flows, because we had to hop from activity to activity, and we had to actually do harder things to level up back then. Or at least, like, you know, there were certain activities where once you hit, like, what was it, 520, it would stop giving you gear above 520, and you had to go to the harder stuff. The problem is Destiny is an MMO in hyperspeed when it comes to leveling, and people can just get through it so much faster. I'm trying to figure out how to interpret this. Endgame right now feels a little weird because the endgame is no longer like, it's not really about getting levels. It's about getting maximum gear. But you can get you can get levels from anywhere. You can do the easiest shit in the game and get levels. And I feel like there's maybe something there. There's maybe something there with like endgame is no longer about reaching max level, but it's about getting the perfect set of alien killing armor and weapons and stuff. I'd want a little more back and forth. The realizing is the test you set yourself to accomplish. Missed the years where there were more than 2 power thresholds for activities. Back when I played in Forsaken, I had to complete an expansions campaign before being high enough power to do its raid and other activities. Not to mention start the next campaign. Now a new player joins, they're instantly high enough to just do about everything except for the latest stuff in high-level Nightfalls. I think that's a kind of a double-edged sword. I know one of the things that Bungie spoke about in the past was the fact that there was that giant barrier of entry. People would be playing and they want to get their friends in, but their friends would have to go grind 30, 40 hours worth of stuff to get to their level, but there was nothing for the friends if they helped new friend level. So being able to just almost near instantly join your friends, arguably pretty good thing, right? I remember this being a very big problem back then. This used to be a big deal where people wanted to get their friends into the game, but their friends didn't want to play for 40, 50 hours doing campaigns, leveling up, doing all these old pieces of content to level up. But it's sort of what gave that end game experience maybe a little bit more flavor. So yeah, this was a very big problem back then. Let's move on. If you want to get better at PvP, you have to play PvP. If you're not good at something, you have to practice to get better. This shouldn't be a hard to accept fact for literally anything. If you want to get better at something, you got to practice. That's why I don't like giving PvP hints. Or not hints, but like people come in like, hey, you got any tips for me for PvP? Practice, man. Practice the game. I don't know what you're bad at. Play the game. Now, granted, I'm going to be playing CS:GO for the first time at some point soon. And I'm going to be playing with some friends who are very good at the game. And me going in with my friends is probably one of the worst ways to start playing CS:GO, because I'm going to get railed by people. It's not a great way to learn. You got to learn against people who are at your level or close to your level. So this I can totally get. But if you want to get better at something, yeah, you got to practice. You got to put in a little bit of work. It goes with raids as well. We're not getting a season of the Siva. The Siva storyline was closed with Rise of Iron and will continue to be relegated to skins and occasional lore tabs. The amount of people still asking me if I think we're going to get a Siva subclass, very high, all things considered. This is a good one. I like this one. This is for some people, this is a hard to accept Destiny fact. This is a good one. I like this one. All right, next one. No one cares that you played Destiny 1 during alpha beta launch. I think it's nice if you did, so that you have insight from back then. But again, we just had this conversation about nostalgia. A lot of people only remember the good things and the good parts about Destiny 1. They don't remember the bad parts. They don't remember the little inconveniences. They don't remember, a lot of these other things. And I do feel like some people use the fact that I played Destiny 1 during alpha beta launch, whatever, as a way of like essentially saying that like they should be respected more than somebody else, and that's absolutely not true if your point is stupid. So yeah, I wouldn't use this during an argument unless the argument literally involves information during the alpha, the beta, or the launch. Garden of Salvation is a good raid. It's your team's coordination, LFG or otherwise, that makes it difficult. I think Garden of Salvation gets too much flack for certain parts. I think the final boss is good. I think the second encounter is not good. The second encounter was built for a day one experience and not any other day. The final boss gets a lot of flack because of the tether mechanic. And here's what I'll say about the tether mechanic. The overwhelming majority of the time, it works. You just don't understand the rules to the tether. the overwhelming majority of the time, when it comes to the tether mechanic, it's because you don't know how it really works. You don't follow its rules, and you don't give it the time that it needs for it to work. The tether mechanic works. You need to go a little bit slower. The tether needs time to find targets. You need to know how far away you can be. It works. You are just impatient. My issue with GOS is that the moat pickup sucks. Yeah, I'll give you that, but I think that's more of like a networking issue on Bungie's end. Yeah, it'd be nice if they picked up a little bit faster. I agree. Let's move on. The community will never be happy about everything. They will eventually find a reason to complain. This is not hard to accept. I'm just gonna move on from this one. This is very obvious. Icebreaker's not coming back. The Icebreaker you know from Destiny 1 is not coming back. Bungie doesn't F with regenerating ammo anymore. If it comes back, it will have a different form. Add No Land Beyond to that as well. They're not coming back. And if they do, they will not be as they were. What is Icebreaker? Icebreaker is a gun that regenerated its ammo slowly over time. Oh, no more fancy tower, Sag. It did have terrible handling. I remember equating it to trying to aim the Titanic. Let's move on from this one. Can I just say that since Witch Queen, it's felt like it's easier to get multiple good rolls on guns without any or much overlap. I'm enjoying having 2 or 3 of each gun. I think what Bungie has done was made it so the ceiling and the floor are a bit closer compared to the past, where the ceiling was much higher and the floor was a lot lower. So that's kind of the vibe that I get, is that it's a bit closer together. Although, I mean, I went getting 100 of the title SMG without getting the perk roll that I wanted, so who really knows for sure. I think there's also a lot more opportunities to get weapons. Feels like Bungie has strived to make less bad perks and more bad for your playstyle perks. Yeah. What about a return of Zalo Supercell? Risk Runner is your Zalo Supercell. They literally give it away. You don't need Artifice or Raid Armor to have good stats. This should not be difficult to accept. You can get high stat roll armor outside of the raid. Solstice was one of the best raids to get high stat armor, and you didn't need to do anything harder than Bonfire Bash. This should be pretty obvious. Also, Artifice armor ended up just being overrated. I thought it was going to be a much more relevant thing going into the future. It's not really that relevant. Like, mods are so expensive, yeah, that you can very rarely use the slot. I tell myself that I tanked my Crucible KD trying to get complete Crucible-centric steps of exotic quests, but in reality, I have the accuracy and reaction time of damp cabbage. I mean, you know, Dave, if that's just what you needed to tell yourself, then, you know, that's a good one. That's good for you. There will always be exotics and guns and abilities that are worse or subpar, and making threads every day of so-and-so exotic needs a little help will never change this. The game is too big for everything to be good at the same time. Some stuff does have to suck for the good stuff to feel as good as it does. I mostly agree with this, yeah. Bungie thinks of exotics as like toys, more or less. The exotics are toys that do neat things. Sometimes the things that they do are really good, and then sometimes they're really bad. But their exoticness is coming from the thing that they do. And some people really like certain things, even if they're not very good. So I think of exotics more as toys nowadays than things that absolutely need to be good. Now, do some things need help? Yeah, some things do. That's all I got on that. Bungie is a company with employees who also have a private life. Yeah, if you're DMing or adding Bungie employees on Twitter and you're not saying like, hey, I really liked this thing, you probably don't need to talk to them. I can't imagine how many like artists get messages from people that are just like, fix your game. Like, how many times does DMG get, why don't you fix your game first, bro? Like, dude, do you know his job? It's to deal with shitheads like you Yeah, this should not be hard to accept for anyone with a brain. Crow is not Aldrin. I don't think this should be hard to accept. All right, we're going to scroll through a few more of these. Shotguns and hand cannons are not even close to being as overpowered as people here like to tell themselves. Yeah, I mean, they've definitely been popular, but do I consider them overpowered? The person with the better shot's going to win most of the time. The entire game is a loop of activities to earn loot that you can then use to more easily complete another activity to earn loot that you can... If you play the game for loot, there isn't actually anything to do with the loot. Yeah, but this is like a lot of games. You just keep on getting more loot to do a higher level thing, to get more loot to do a higher level thing. That's kind of what the game is. Shouldn't be hard to accept. Raids like Vow or Garden are not hard. You are simply bad at PvE. Okay. I would have to say I don't think a single raid in the game is hard. And there are some people who just don't know how to follow instruction. I'm not going to give as much flack to people who are raiding who struggle with combat experiences. For example, the third encounter in Vow is very combat heavy, and if you struggle with fast-paced combat, you are probably going to struggle. But that's a big contrast to something like trying to follow a raid mechanic, because most raid mechanics don't really, like, when you really boil them down into their basic form, they're not really that complex. Let's just think about some raid bosses. Last Wish, Kali. What do you have to do? You have to match symbols, find the right plate, kill some stuff, shoot her in the head, and then walk in a door. Shirochi, 3 people stand on plates and shoot a rock, and then you shoot them in the head, and then you look at a puzzle on a wall, and 4 people step on plates. A lot of raid mechanics are not really that complex when you really dilute them into their most basic forms. And I'm gonna be honest, I do wonder what goes through people's heads when they cannot comprehend certain mechanics. If you can't comprehend that you need to tether to a thing to get a buff to shoot some shields off of an enemy, I don't know what to tell you. But when it comes to combat, I am much more forgiving, because not everyone is as good at combat, right? You can, like, mechanics are brain, and combat is hands, right? Sometimes your hands just, you can't get your hands to do the thing that you want. But with your brain, you can understand, like, oh, I need to walk in this door at this time, or I need to step on this plate at that time. And if you can't get that, then, like, what's going on? What's going on, buddy? Graviton Lance is a scout rifle. I don't think this should be hard to accept, but it's technically a pulse rifle. If you hate recycled content but loved opulence, you're hypocritical. Let's see some replies to this. Wow. That's a spicy one, yeah. That's a spicy one. Interesting. I mean, I've said this so many times, but opulence is the season that I think ruined seasons, because it was so good. That's a hot one. That's a hot one. No one cares how long you've been playing or that you're a parent with 0.1 seconds a week to play Destiny. Yeah, PvE isn't hard. Okay. All right, let's sort by controversial and see what people said. SBMM won't fix you getting good at PvP. Your refusal to actually learn from mistakes is your biggest fault. Woo. I do think, I feel like people exaggerate how often they have someone who's like a 6.3 KD gamer in their Crucible games. I could be wrong. But do some people need a reality check in that it doesn't matter how much, what the matchmaking is like, you're just not that good at PvP? Yeah. You could remove PvP and the game would do just fine. Oof. I feel like people meme this. Would the game do just fine? I think if you're primarily a PvE player, you could have this mentality, but Trials is a lot to some people. I'm not sure I agree wholeheartedly. Now, do I think you could make a lot of improvements to the PvE side of the game if you removed PvP? Sure. But this might be a smidge too spicy. Even though PvP is literally just, it's like not a competitive thing at all. It's just sort of you know, it's just sort of a thing to go do. Yeah, I don't, at this point, like, you can't remove it. Cannot remove it. We're far too deep in. Destiny is not a PvP game and benefits from less focus / removal of PvP, preferably into a separate game. It would not surprise me if, well, I don't know if that Bungie would ever come out with a standalone PvP Destiny experience. I don't know if they would ever do that. It'd be interesting. I don't know if they ever do that. Most PvE nerfs happen because of PvE. You greatly overblow the stuff that happens because of Crucible. Annoying that it happens at all? Sure. Slugs, super exotics, supers, anarchy, mountaintop, recluse, well of radiance, lunafaction, tracking rockets, rapid fire fusions, renewal grass, protective light. So many things in this game are nerfed because they're too strong, not because of Crucible. I'd say it's closer to maybe 10 to 20% because of Crucible, and while I'd like it to be 0, it's greatly overblown. So we had the opposite of this, where someone said 99%, and I was like, I'd give you more than 50. Well of Radiance and debuff stacking was not because of PvP. And there are a lot of things in the game that are just way too good in PvE, but people don't want to accept that because they don't like nerfs, but it has nothing to do with PvP. So yeah, and Protective Light, people are so mad that they nerfed Protective Light. I was like, you know why they nerfed it, right? Because you could literally just have a get out of jail free card literally all of the time in PvE. Most PvP players aren't good. They just have better loadouts and cheese than the people they play. I think that's copium. Are there loadouts that are better than others that will give you more of an advantage? Yeah. But if you give a low skill player the best equipment in the game and the best stats and the best perk rolls, and you put them up against someone who is just better than them with some random stuff, the better Crucible player is probably gonna win. Now, if you give a bad player the best stuff versus a bad player who's using whatever stuff they want, the guy with the better stuff's probably gonna win. Just because Void Hunter is effective, that doesn't make the fact that it's boring okay. People who act like there's nothing wrong with that have forgotten that a video game is supposed to be fun. This feels more subjective. This is subjective. It's boring to this person. I know plenty of people who love doing the invis spam stuff. I think it's too subjective. PvE game for, yeah, okay. Titans are OP and hunters are only good for invis, yeah. The game was better when Bungie was owned by Activision. Woo! Woo! This has some D1 is better than D2 vibes, and probably like some Forsaken opulence stuff in there as well. I don't know about that. A god roll is an opinion, so how is this a hard to accept fact? God roll is an opinion. I do think there are some god rolls out there that are not opinions, because some weapons literally only have 1 or 2 rolls that are good and everything else is just ass. But then there are plenty of weapons that have a lot of rolls, and it really just depends on the build that you're going for. Destiny, okay, so I feel like a lot of these are going to be remove PvP from the game. Titan melee should go on cooldown if they do not make contact with an opponent. This feels like an opinion that is not good. I think we're skewing away from the main point, so I think we might wrap it up here. Stompees was at best an average exotic before the nerf and the worst movement exotic between the 3 classes. People only thought they were good because everyone used them. Hunters have plenty of exotics with more utility that are just now being accused of being annoying and OP. Titans have Dune Marchers that give chain lightning. Warlocks have Transversive that reload weapons. Stompees increase jump. This is not good. This is not a take that I would agree with in the slightest. In fact, I was doing research for a video a while back, and I went on a couple of tracking websites, you know, tracking people's elo and skill ratings and stuff like that. And I looked through a lot of hunters. I looked through a lot of the top active hunters that are playing the game across various platforms. The first 19 in a row that I looked at were using Stompees. If Stompees were not truly that good, I don't think you would have that many people using them. When I did the other classes, there was a bit more variety, little bit here and there. Hunters were the only one that were dominant in their selection. To say that they were an average exotic at best is not it. D2 was better year 1 than year 4. What is this on my screen? Year 1 was so rough that I almost quit. YouTube. Year 1 was so rough that Bungie needed to invite the entire content creator scene to their studio for 2 days. I think we're done.